So the way the assessment adapts is just statistical difficulty. If you've seen any of the release tests, if you have the PDF version, if you're not looking at the one that looks like the actual test, you can go into the portal, or not the portal, you can go to flfast.org and you can take a practice test. The full tests are in there. But if you actually look at the PDF that shows you the correct answer, shows you what benchmark it's aligned to, all of that, there's also a line that says percentage of students that got it correct, and it might say like 60%. That number is what informs how the test adapts. So students who are trending towards being like a 4 or a 5, they're going to get questions that are lower on that percentage, right? If 20% of students get a question correct, statistically that is difficult. That doesn't necessarily mean it's more rigorous. Most of the time it does. Like there's always outliers, there's always things that are weird. Some benchmarks are just harder than other benchmarks. But most of the time it does tend to be more rigorous. The numbers are more complex. The word problems are bigger. If it's a multi-step problem, maybe instead of being addition and then subtraction, it's multiplication and then division. Both of those things are aligned to the benchmark, but one is just more rigorous than the other, and that tends to reflect in the data. So students who are doing really well are going to get those questions. Students who are trending to be like 1s or 2s are going to get questions that 75-80% of students get right. Every question in the bank is aligned to the grade level. So 5th grade, every question in the bank is aligned to 5th grade. For example, one of the benchmarks we're going to look at later deals with dividing decimals. 10 divided by 2.2. That's a 5th grade question, right? That is fully aligned to 5th grade. It is not 6th grade. It is not 4th grade. It is a 5th grade question. It is a lot more friendly than 327.6 divided by 3.1, right? But those are both 5th grade. Most likely, your students that are 4s and 5s are going to get that second example I gave you, and your 1s and 2s are going to get things that look more like that first example I gave you. That was an extreme example to kind of make a point, but that's how the adaptive nature of the test works. So when we think about alignment and rigor, if we are fully aligned, if I'm a 5th grade teacher and I'm fully aligned, but I'm only touching the bottom half of the contextual complexity that students could get to, if I'm only touching the bottom half of the numerical complexity that students could get to, then my 4s and 5s aren't experiencing in class the complexity they're going to see on the assessment. And so maybe I'm doing really, really, really good in class, and I'm getting hundreds on everything, but then I go take the test and I have a problem that, I've never seen this many digits. I've never seen this many words before, and maybe they could do it, but if the first time they're experiencing that is on a high-stakes test, y'all know how that works, right? I'm freaked out by the numbers. I'm freaked out by the words. I've never seen anything like this. How do I do it? And so thinking about upping the rigor and thinking about alignment, I like to say alignment is a spectrum. When I go into a classroom, if I'm doing a walkthrough, it's not if someone says, hey, were they aligned? That's not a yes or no question, right? It's much more complex than that. So as we continue and we're thinking about rigor, we're thinking about how to address some of these things we're seeing in data, keep that in mind, right? And when we want to align and we want to get more rigorous, we have to think about those things. What might the questions in the 20s and 30s, the harder questions, what might those questions look like? What might that context look like? What might those look like? We talked in, I don't know if it was Rural Connect 2 or 1, we talked a little bit about the achievement level descriptors. That's a start in thinking about it. It's not technically a one-to-one though. The achievement level descriptors aren't how the assessment adapts. So if I were to say, if you look at level 2, that's what all level 2s are going to see on FAST. If you look at level 4, that's what all level 4s are going to see on FAST. It's done completely different. The achievement level descriptors were drafted early on in the assessment. The adaptive is just based on the data in a question's pilot year. I would say on average it lines up, but some questions just test hard, or some benchmarks just test really hard. It doesn't matter how simple the question looks, it's just a tough benchmark. And so everything winds up being really, really low. Some benchmarks just test easy. So it doesn't matter how much context I put in there or what numbers I use, everyone tends to be successful. So there are some cases where what it says in achievement level descriptor 4 Might actually be a question that a level 1 gets because it's a 0.8, like 80% of kids get it right. Or there might be some cases where, the opposite of that happens. On average, I would say it kind of works out, and it's also the only thing we have. Like, it's our best chance to start. It's the most clear document we have that gives us a starting place. Kevin?
So if a kid's a level 1 kid and they're taking that test and everyone gets the same amount of questions, correct? Mm-hmm. So if I continuously get questions correct, is my test changing in that test?
Yes. So it adapts question to question. So if you get, let's say the algorithm says, all right, right now, Kevin, you're getting NSO 2.2. And your PM2, you were level 1. So your NSO 2.2 question is like an 80% question. You get it right. The algorithm says, okay, Kevin next needs AR 2.1. We're going to give him a 70%. You get it wrong, now you're going to get an easier question. And the way the algorithm works, it focuses on two things at two different times. So it focuses on one, the blueprint, which tells you what benchmarks you're getting, and then the statistical difficulty. Early in the test, it doesn't really care about the blueprint. Like it's not gonna give you something out of line in the blueprint, but because I've got many opportunities to give you all these questions, I care more about statistical difficulty. So if you're in like the 80s early on in the test and there's a specific benchmark that's just really hard and there are no questions at the 80% for that benchmark, you're not going to get that benchmark yet because it can't find one at the appropriate statistical difficulty. Later on in the test, it's got to finish the blueprint. So if you've been in the 70s and 80s, but now you've got 4 benchmarks left, and those 4 benchmarks, there just are no easy questions in the bank, it's going to give you whatever it can. So you might get, like a level 1 might get a 20% question because that's all that's left. There just isn't a question in the bank that aligns. So early on in the test, which I think for students is actually really good, because for students that means early in the test, like they're getting what they need. They can build that confidence, and then later on, hopefully it's getting harder. Because hopefully that 1 is trying to become a 3, and they're going to keep getting questions right and right and right and right. And so, I don't know, does that answer the question? Okay.
Is that the same way that it works for a kid that doesn't have scores from prior year?
So if there is nothing to start from, like absolutely nothing, it's going to start them just like middle of the road.
Okay.
So that's the same way that the EOCs, that's the same way that now science and civics are like partially adaptive. That's the way those are starting. Like Algebra 1 EOC starts at the middle of the road. It doesn't matter how you did in 8th grade or 7th grade. So if there is nothing to know where to start from, it's going to start middle of the road. If you've got a PM2, it's going to start you where you left off at PM2, which I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. That is why it's really important that we tell students to take PM1 and PM2 seriously. Because if you just flunk PM1 and 2 for fun, right, you just don't care, and you're a level 1 at PM2, but you're actually a student who should be a level 5, you might not get enough questions to work your way back up to level 5. Like, I only have so many questions, and it's only going to adapt so fast. So maybe like I started like I was first percentile, right? I only have like 30-something questions. That might not be enough data to inform the algorithm that I'm actually at this level. And that came up in an idea around that came up in a couple other groups. Noticed that there were a lot of like really low PM1s. That happens for a couple reasons. One of those reasons could be the kids just didn't take it seriously. Maybe they were told not to take it seriously. I've seen that happen. Or maybe they were just told, like, a teacher was doing the best they could and trying to be comforting and say, hey, like, it doesn't count. It's okay. Don't stress about it. Like, it's okay if it's really bad. And that's not untrue. But if I'm a student who's, like, naturally stressed out and I've never been proficient before in my life and you tell me that, I'm not taking that test seriously. Like, the moment I feel uncomfortable, I'm guessing. Right? And so this is common. There's a ton of data that suggests summer slide is far worse in rural poor areas than urban, more affluent areas. And so that's one of the reasons that on these reports, like once we're past PM1, like we're connecting prior year to PM2. So I don't want to say ignore it, but like some of these, I'm not sure how valuable that PM1 data point really is. And so thinking about, the assessments and the nature of them and when the tests are given, all of that needs to go into interpretation of the data and into the analysis of what we're going to do about the data.